an issue of mental health or disability. These are some of those issues which, if you haven't experienced it, if you weren't a caregiver to somebody who has a disability or who has a mental illness, or maybe you have one yourself, unless and until you have that personal experience, it's very hard to relate. What is it like to not be able to log in on a website? Does not have to be some life-altering steps that you take. You give up your job and you go into the village and, do something very dramatic and something that completely changes your life. But it's about any step that you take to make a positive change counts. And that what we really need to do is unlock that possibility for many more people.
Welcome to Inspire Someone Today podcast, a show where we dive into the stories and insights that has the power to create ripples of inspiration in your life. I'm your host Shrikant, and I'm thrilled to be with you on this journey of inspiration. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to yet another episode of Inspire Someone Today. Whom do we have on the show today? Well, we have somebody who has come down to India all the way from Kazakhstan. We have Irina, who is the founder of Udanta Consulting, an organization focused on supporting social impact and philanthropy. It's an absolute joy and honor to have Irina on this episode of Inspire Someone Today. Welcome to the show, Irina.
Hi, Shikar. Hi. It's a pleasure to meet you. And hello to all your audience.
Great. Like I mentioned, what caught my attention was the kind of work that you have been doing through your organization, Udanta Consulting. We'll quickly get into that. Even more was that poem that came to my mind, The Road Less Traveled. So, starting from Kazakhstan all the way to India, making India as your home, and you had your own journey. Walk us through this journey of yours. How did this all started, and what took you to do what you're doing now?
It has been indeed an interesting journey. And for me, the connection with India began really early in my life. Like you said, I grew up in Almaty in Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan it's a very large country. It's the ninth biggest country in the world. Yet it's only got 14 million people, which is probably now a population of Sadashiv Nagar alone in Bangalore, right? I mean, I am exaggerating, but it's a country that's pretty empty. You can go for days without seeing anyone, and India is exactly the opposite of that. And I came to India first time. Actually, India was the first country where I traveled abroad when I was 16 years old. And I came on a backpacking trip with a friend, and did some usual visiting to Varanasi and Taj Mahal and places like that. And there was something in the air in India that I just found so fascinating and exciting, and wanted to come back here. And then I helped a mother of a friend of mine had a business. She wanted to start a business of selling, handicrafts from India in Kazakhstan. And so throughout my college, I actually came down with her many, many times to help her find, things that she could then buy and sell back home. So throughout my college years, I kept coming to India on these little trips and seen the underbelly of the daily markets, bargained with everybody. And I developed a complete phobia of shopping since then. I hate shopping now because we used to buy containers and containers of stuff. Yeah. So, and then I was a member of this student exchange organization called ISEC, which is a global organization that invites young people to have these experiences of working abroad and experiencing different culture. And so, again, in my third year of college, I came to India on a summer internship in Punjab, working in public schools there for 3 months. So just kept getting all these opportunities to actually come and see India from all these different angles, really diverse experiences. And then after I graduated, I studied in Kazakhstan. After I graduated, I went to work in Hong Kong, and I worked there for a year in the university. But somehow I felt more connected to Indian culture versus the Chinese culture. So I felt this desire to actually go back to India somehow. And I came to work with a nonprofit organization in Bombay. And that literally was 14 years ago. And I was still very young. I was just 22 years old. So I don't know, at this age, at least I didn't have these very elaborate plans of what I'm going to do and how my life is going to pan out. I think you just try things out and you know what you're good at, you know what you are drawn to, you know what you're excited about, and then you do the best you can in the places where you end up. So when I came 14 years ago, I didn't necessarily say, oh, this is going to be my home. But then opportunities kept coming. I had great opportunities to work with the social sector in India over all these years. Eventually met my husband as well. Then life happened.
Life happened and you went with the flow. And boy, there was that diversity of experience. I hear you saying you've been in Punjab, in Varanasi, in Mumbai, all of these places. And how has these experiences shaped up? Did it instill a sense of fear or self-doubt that you're coming from a completely different culture, a different country, and setting your foot in a completely different setup and a different culture? What was those experiences like? What was some of the inhibitions that you had? What are some of the things that you thought worked in your favor?
I sometimes think about this and I feel like when I was young, I truly had no inhibitions. I just had no fears, and I look at my kids now who are 7 and 4. I mean, I hope that they are also fearless and, courageous and brave. But I also think about how did my parents allow me to do all this stuff that I did when I was so young, And I know I'm grateful to them for giving me this opportunity because this made me who I am. And it wouldn't be the same if I didn't do the things I did. In India, somehow, I never felt like an outsider. And I feel it has something to do with the fact that in some ways, everyone in India is outsider depending on where you go, right? So if you are from Tamil Nadu and you come to Madhya Pradesh, you are an outsider. If you are from Punjab and you came to Bangalore, you are an outsider. So there is already so much diversity, but also a lot of tolerance and acceptance of people for what they are. And also, generally, I find friendliness and openness of people for people to be from different places with different cultures. So I never particularly felt as an outsider. And when I was working in Bombay with this NGO, it's a rural development organization. So I traveled a lot in rural Maharashtra, Solapur, Osmanabad. And I didn't feel like an outsider. And of course, I was an outsider, but I didn't feel particularly, made to feel an outsider. And of course, you have to be aware of, and you have to respect the cultural context of the place where you're going to, and you have to be mindful and respectful of that. But apart from that, I always felt quite at home, I must say.
So you felt at home, you were fearless, you wanted to try out multiple things, and then you started working with Ashoka on a very, very interesting project, which was finding leaders for or finding social entrepreneurs. How did this happen, and what is that whole mission about?
Yeah, so I was working with this organization in Bombay and was led by truly an incredible woman. Her name was Prema Gopalan. She's well known in the development sector. She passed away a couple of years ago, and I've always been incredibly impressed and moved by the way she was as a leader. And she led this huge rural development organization, and she always allowed that kind of creativity and leadership to grow from within the organization, starting from, rural women and small women collectives and how these women emerged then as leaders in their villages and districts and, went all the way up to UN to talk about issues of women or how women are tackling challenges of clean energy and things like that. So two people who worked in the organization, and me being a 22-year-old completely clueless in many regards to, what this whole thing was about. She just gave me so much trust and freedom to try things out, to learn, to manifest what I could do. So she remained a friend for many, many years and a mentor. And basically through her, then I ended up coming for this conference of this global organization called Ashoka Innovators for the Public. And it's a global network of social entrepreneurs. So people who dedicate their life to solving social issues, and suddenly me being the impressionable, 23-year-old, I met 200 people just like Prema in
Mhm.
one hotel at one conference, right? And I actually couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that you could have such a concentration of incredible people in one place, and they were incredible, not just because of the way they thought, but also what they spent their lives doing. They were all, so Ashoka Fellows are selected for their work on solving some of the world's toughest problems. And these are people who very often, they didn't come from wealth, they didn't come from a great sense of opportunity or privilege, but they saw a problem and they took a decision that this is what they're going to spend their life doing. They're going to try to solve this problem, and then there's so much creativity, there's so much entrepreneurial energy, there's so much that happens on that journey. And for me, it was just a no-brainer. I said, I have to work with these people. I want to be around people like that, And so at the time, I literally wrote a mail to something like Ashoka India dot whatever at org or something, and they said, I have to join your organization. There's just I'm coming. This is it.
You have no
And
choice.
yeah, I am coming. And somebody who's a very dear friend to me now. She was at the time looking for a team in India and hiring some new people, and so she spoke to me and she was like, "Okay, come," and so that's how I moved to Bangalore. And then I spent over 10 years living in Bangalore after that. And I started on this work of the search of selection of the Ashoka Fellows, which again actually has taken me all around the country, traveling some of the, smallest villages and places to find these social entrepreneurs. And the joy of this process for me was that it's not an award where somebody's been doing something for 20 years and then you come and you celebrate them. You are looking for somebody who's still struggling, somebody who is still maybe just starting out, but it's in the quality of their thinking and in the commitment that they're showing and then the trajectory that you have seen them take, that you are actually able to see where are these people going. And you can imagine that 10, 20 years from now, these people are going to shape this country. They're going to shape how we look about things like primary health or, access to mental health or access to credit or whatever field you take. So I think for me, and I did this work for about 4 years, for me, just learning about this country from the eyes of these people who see opportunity, who see potential, who see a future from a very positive way and not in a naive way. They're not naive that they don't know. They know very deeply all the issues that are happening on the ground, and they still choose to take that path of saying there can be a better future and we can build it, right? So it was just such an incredible opportunity and privilege to learn about India and all of the multitude of its contexts and cultures and issues and opportunities through the eyes of these people.
No, it's a very, very interesting piece of insight that you shared here. This is not your traditional leaders that we all associate with, right? These are leaders on their own, in their own way, because they have a vision for the future that nobody else would have seen that. They know the challenges, like you said, they know the challenges, but they still want to get into it. And having worked with so many of such social entrepreneurs, what are two or three common traits that you see saying that, okay, this is the making of a leader, this is the making of that next big challenge or the problem for the society that this individual is going to solve for?
The first trait that always comes out is that it's more often than not a trajectory of a person. And it's not a trajectory like you're climbing some kind of a corporate ladder, but it's you are from the very young age have been a change maker of some kind. So maybe you were in school and there was no space club in your school and you were like determined to say, I'm going to start a spaceman's club in my school. And, you wrote to everybody in ISRO and the director of ISRO saying, I want to start a space club in my school. So it's people who typically dare to dream, even when they're very young. And not just dream, but actually get together your 10 classmates and, do something, and it can take different forms. It doesn't necessarily mean solving a social issue from the early age, but it's just that a way of seeing that you can actually create a new reality. You can actually get people together so that teamwork and, that magnitude of the personality to say, hey, we can actually do something and we can do this differently. So that most typically you can always see, so people who end up being social entrepreneurs, they have that trajectory.
Initiative taking kind of a trait there.
Yeah, and also kind of like formulating a more compelling vision for what can be. It's like, oh, why should there not be a football club in our school? Oh, why should there not be a newspaper? Oh, can we go and get this done? That's sort of a thing, and then being able to bring other people along, because I think from the way I'm saying it, it may sound like it's about this lonely standalone heroes and, who are just kind of standing there as great, examples, shining examples of success. But actually, what the real superpower that they have is how do you distribute that belief that you can solve the problem much more widely, and you inspire and just unlock possibilities for others to do something. So it's not so much about I'm going to go and do and solve it. There are also people like that. But I think what social entrepreneurs end up doing is actually unlocking the ability of many, many people in society to be able to improve something around this particular issue.
Great. And many of these societal problems, like you mentioned, has a long gestation period. It's not something you think of it today and solve for it tomorrow, right? It creates massive impact that goes beyond an organization. It impacts a community. In some cases, impacts many communities. How to look at a problem and imagine the solution, not from a place of, okay, there's so much of constraints around it, limitations around it, but from a perspective of we can solve for this, we can scale this, there is hope, there is light at the end of the tunnel. So, how do you see that panning out?
That has been the question that I have been trying to understand and explore for the last 4 years very closely. And we actually created a learning program around it between Ashoka and another organization called Societal Thinking, where we were really trying to find some answers to these questions. And I think that because very often what ends up happening, and it's a little bit detrimental to the point of solving a problem, is that you create an NGO and then you run your programs and, and then you become so enveloped in running this organization and you become so tied up by saying, how do I pay the bills? How do I look after the staff? And so it just becomes an institution like any other. So it's solving the problem in some way, in some context, somewhere. But when you see where does the intent come from, the intent very rarely comes from saying, oh, I can do it for 50 people. I can do it for 100 people. The intent always comes from saying, this is just not right. Like people with disabilities should have access to digital space, or they should have access to physical spaces everywhere. You don't think, oh, I should fix it for the city of Panjim, or I should fix it for Bangalore. No, you believe it should happen everywhere, right? But when you start an organization, you get constrained. The way you raise money, the way things, what can you do, right? So, but there are some entrepreneurs who we have seen have been able to kind of break out of that mold and really keep their eyes on the problem as a whole, at the size of it that it exists, saying in every tiny village, in every tier 2 town, and in every metropolis of India, there are people with disabilities who all need this access, and that's their basic human right. Now, how do we make that happen, right? And what we have discovered by learning with these entrepreneurs and working with them closely is that they end up focusing a lot more, not on solving the problem here and now, but creating this kind of a, what we call the change-making network that is solving this problem at multiple levels throughout time, right? So into the future. So, and you kind of building this like a winning coalition of people who all have their eyes on this problem, right? From different angles as well. And you're trying to help everybody succeed in a sense, no? So, and I've actually co-authored a book with my two colleagues from Ashoka, Sushmita Ghosh and Maria Zapata, around innovations such as this, social entrepreneurs who have managed to achieve truly huge impact by creating this kind of networks. So, and around the world, right? And we really, what we have seen and what we believe is that no matter what is the problem you're trying to solve, if you begin to think that way, you can make so much larger a dent in the size of this problem as it exists. And I'm not necessarily talking here about, oh, let's get together and collaborate. I think that's why one way of doing, but it's still very narrow. But you are really trying to imagine that at a population scale, who are all the different actors who need to care about it, and what is their contribution to that vision of complete inclusion, for example, right, of people with disability. I'm just giving that as an example. There's a specific entrepreneur that I have in mind that I'm just using her as a reference point, and she's actually from Bangalore. Her name is Shanti Raghavan, and her husband Dipesh. She's a founder. Both of them are founders of an organization called Enable India, and their work is a great example of how do you move from running programs and implementing change in specific places to really building for massive scale impact with this winning coalitions of change makers, innovators, people who work on policy, people in companies who want to embrace this new way of thinking and say, we want our company to be inclusive for people with disabilities, or people who are innovating around physical access, saying, how do we create physical access tools for the context such as India, where for able-bodied people, sometimes to walk down the road could be a dangerous endeavor. So how do you then design for physical accessibility for people with disabilities, right? So, and what they are doing is really assembling this massive constellation of leaders. And once people kind of shed this approach of saying, this is my organization, I have to build my organization, I have to become bigger and big, because then you're building an empire of your own, right? Once you kind of shed that and you're not trying to build your organization, hire more people, you actually want more people to do more stuff, and you give away a lot of the control, give away a lot of the resources as well. You're not trying to say, I will hoard the resources, I will hire this 100 people. Say, great, this company wants to do this program, let me connect them to these people who can do this well. And you are just a little link in between. And what ends up happening when everybody in the ecosystem can see it is that they begin to trust you, and you become this magnet, where people, whoever wants to do something with disability, you become the first person they come to. And then you are able to actually draw resources and talent and entrepreneurial talent and goodwill of people and companies and stakeholders in society, So that's what we have seen happen with people who are actually able to switch that mindset, saying, I can solve the problem. Because then you become the problem in some way, because you believe you are the solution.
I think very interesting. You're touching upon multiple things out here. To solve big problems, you don't have to be all by yourself. Build a coalition of willing, so to say, so that you have a larger network, larger ecosystem to solve such problems, which is true. Unless until I'm not passionate about what that problem is, I will not be able to kind of take that lead and solve. So one is having that passion to identify, and then not to kind of build it by yourself, but kind of build it to a community is what you're kind of alluding to.
Yeah, absolutely. And also being able to get people excited about this problem, right? Like, how do you make it relevant? Because for example, an issue of mental health or disability, these are some of those issues which if you haven't experienced it, if you weren't a caregiver to somebody who has a disability or who has a mental illness, or maybe you have one yourself, unless and until you have that personal experience, it's very hard to relate. It's very hard to relate. What is it like to not be able to log in on a website? If, for instance, if you are visually impaired, because it's not made accessible, and to be able to say, bring in companies on board and say, it doesn't take you much to make that difference, to make your website accessible so a visually impaired person can log in. You just have to have an audio, support system, whatever. But it's very simple tweaks, actually. And to not only do it from a perspective, say, oh, this is a basic right, but also to say, here are all these millions of people who want to be your users, who want to play with you, and you are leaving them behind, excluding them for the lack of a tiny, layer in the way, say, your website is built, right? So being able to make it simple and compelling for people to say, yeah, of course I want to be able to cater with my website or my company or my product to everybody who wants to access it, right? Like, who would say no to that? But it's in that art of being able to articulate it like that and put it forth to society, to companies, to businesses, to anybody, right? In that way, that makes them want to play and makes it so easy for them to be a part of that as well.
So true. And what are the other elements of solving big problems at scale? What are the other attributes you have seen organizations, social entrepreneurs having to solve such big problems?
Well, I think that what I have seen is that it's a lot about this distributing this ability to solve, right? And it's also about helping find those next generation of leaders, helping them grow, helping them get into it. So one of great examples of this that I find is, and it's very famous in India, the Teach for India program, right? And I think now in India, top graduates from the country apply for this program. But it's a very large global program actually called Teach for All. And that's how it started by another Ashoka Fellow, Wendy Kopp. And when she wanted to she worked in the United States on solving the issues of education. But what she realized was that it was such a wicked problem of why kids are not getting good education. And there were so many layers to why that might be happening that not one innovation could ever possibly solve it. You can have better textbooks and train teachers and have a better classroom, but there will always be something that's failing in this system. And not just now, but into the future. So what she realized is that the only way to really solve this problem into the future would be to have a generation of leaders who care about kids getting good education. And so whenever the new problems occur, the problem evolves with the times, right? Everything is changing all the time. So are the problems. So unless you have leaders who are constantly have their eyes on the ball and thinking about how do I tackle this here and that there, you will always be behind the problem. So, and that's how she created this idea of Teach for All, saying that if you give young people an opportunity to be in a public classroom for 2 years and you give them enough insight on what could it be if the education worked, right? They get the joy, they get enough training and joy from teaching kids and seeing how that transforms. They work with the school and they see how little tweaks make a great difference, right? So they get this confidence saying, actually, if you make some of these changes, you can see a world of a difference, right? So you give them this 2 years of exposure to how things can be if it works. And what they ended up seeing over this, they work now in, I don't remember, something like 40 countries that teach for, Uganda and teach for Ukraine and teach for, all these different countries. And what they have seen over and over again, that a lot of these young people, once they finish these 2 years, they end up being champions for education for life. So, and some of them become ministers of education. Some of them start new organizations. Some of them, join the mainstream. But they have a certain way of looking at education and a vision of what good education means, right? And so in a way, again, you are curating this network, a very decentralized network of leaders who have a shared vision of what a good education system looks like. And they're constantly working at it at all these different levels and levers.
Great. And as we're talking a lot about building that network, building that community, the coalition of willing, and he has seen a lot of these organizations from different lenses, either as a consultant or seen from a distance very closely through Ashoka as well. How can one go about creating a thriving change making network? What are some of the pieces if people listening to this conversation were to say, that strikes a chord with me, but I don't know how to go about create a change maker network of sorts? What would be your answer to them or recommendation to them?
So I'll speak a little bit about there's another organization and another Ashoka Fellow whose work I really admire and also work with him closely. His name is Kuldeep Tantavade, and he's also from Bangalore, in fact. And the organization is called Benefit. And what is wonderful about their work is that they recognized that change making does not have to be some life-altering steps that you take. You give up your job and you go into the village and, I don't know, do something very dramatic and something that completely changes your life. But it's about any step that you take to make a positive change counts. And that what we really need to do is unlock that possibility for many more people. So some people are just more naturally inclined if they see a problem, if they see, a garbage being dumped on your street or a pothole or something that's not working well. We are naturally inclined to say, this shouldn't happen, and we'll go and talk to the person or do something. But it's not always so obvious for most people. What do you actually do? Like if there is a problem that you see, whatever it may be, maybe there's a water leakage and it's just leaking onto the road. Who do you go to? Who do you tell, right? So what Kuldeep and his organization uncovered is that you can move many more people up that ladder if you make it simpler for them to make the first step. And it doesn't have to be big, right? It's just about pointing something out or contacting your local municipality or getting a few friends together on solving a particular issue in your school. Maybe there's a inefficient way, the way your school uses energy and you can do something, or the air pollution, so they basically help young people identify these really small problems. And then they have a way of mentoring them to say, how do you take it from A to B? How do you solve it? And what they have seen is that naturally they get better at it. It's a skill, right? It's not some God-given thing that you are either like this or like that. It's actually a skill. So once you begin to practice, they call it a civic muscle, right? So once you begin to practice it, once you have come and you have seen that you can call somebody or you can get a bunch of citizens together and get something done, you realize, I can do something else. And then it gets exciting because you are, for young people, and it's true for everyone, but for young people, you are suddenly feeling powerful, right? You're like, I can actually cause change in the world, by me talking to some people and getting some people together, right? So it's exciting and it's exhilarating and it gives you confidence. So, and what is really interesting about that is that the world is also changing. So this whole idea of you go to university and you become a good engineer or something, and then you go to the job and you just do what you've been taught to do for years and years and years, that paradigm is already out of the window. It's like, if anybody's still holding on to that, like they better wake up and smell the roses. This is gone, right? That world is gone. So everybody has to constantly keep their eye on what is happening, what is the problem right now, how can I use all my intelligence and skills and, empathy and whatnot to be able to solve this problem, right? So in a way, what you're learning through these acts of, say, what Reed Benefit called, civic participation or civic muscle, is that you're learning this essential, what they call 21st century skills, right? That you are able to be a leader in the context that is needed right now. And you can't be trained on what needs to be done. You can only be trained in terms of how do you need to show up for the problems that are to come, right? So, and that's what it trains you to do. And another really cool thing that the benefit does and what they realize is necessary is because it's slowly like all my friends are playing in the playground and here I am, obsessing about garbage segregation and nobody's listening to me. It could be very isolating, right? So you need that community. You need other people who think like you and who agree that, yeah, that's a problem, we should solve it. And also you want to be able to, somebody should recognize it for what you did. And so Reap Benefit also has this whole system of badges and of recognizing, saying, hey, by doing this, by calling up municipality and sorting up the garbage pickup issue, you develop this particular skill, problem solving skill or whatever it is, right? So, and then you actually have a digital portfolio of things you did and, the badges of different skills that you have developed. And I really think that the future is that companies and universities will look more and more for people who are able to behave like that. And it doesn't matter what issue you were solving, but you actually went and, sorted it out somehow.
It's such a cool way of bringing in change. You're not forcing it, it's very subtle, and you're kind of recognizing some of those change makers who take that action. Wonderful.
Yeah.
So, if you are ready, we'll get into the power of three round.
No. Okay.
You did mention about some of the change makers, some of the change making organizations. Three change makers to watch out for.
Kuldeep Dantivadia, Shanti Raghavan, Bridge Kotari.
Okay, great. What are the three sources of information or knowledge people can pick around systems thinking, around change managers, change management network, all of it? What's the source that you go to or you recommend people to go to have better awareness about?
Well, I would recommend the book that I have co-wrote with my colleagues called How to Build a Change-Making Network by Sushmita Ghosh, who's a primary author. I would definitely recommend this book. Then there is great books on systems change by Donella Meadows. And I would say just get into a community or into a problem. If you see any problem that's happening in front of you, even in your own family, try to understand who is involved, who is playing what role, who is incentivizing what behavior, and what are the outcomes that are being produced in this process. And then think about how you can change somehow this dynamic. And, that's how you really master the systems change, right? The thing about systems change, while you can get obsessed about it as a, this great theoretical construct, but in reality, in order to be able to do it, you have to understand that everything is done by people, right? Certain behaviors and practices. So just start from something small, your own classroom, and see what is the system of that classroom. And if you want to fix something in that, what would you have to do? And elevate yourself a little bit. You are observer of the system and not a participant in it. That's probably the best way of really learning about systems change, not from a theory, but from applied practice.
Be a good observer. That's a takeaway there. What three tips would you recommend for somebody to be a good networking person?
Be truthful. Say the truth. Focus on giving value to people. Whatever the interaction you have, think about how can you be of value to these people, whoever they are. And the third one, connect the dots with other people. If you see somebody who is looking for an answer, somebody who knows the answer, make sure that you connect them. Never miss that opportunity to connect people if you see there is a synergy or opportunity.
So, Ira, if you were to give an advice, not to your younger self, but to your older self, what advice would you give to Ira, the older one?
I think stress less about unimportant things. Focus on good relationships with your family and people, anyone you touch. And be a source of light. Everyone around you. Don't be a source of trouble for people. Be a source of light and calmness for people around you.
Nice. So this is the era 5 years from now. We'll be reflecting on and saying, "Oh,
Definitely,
this."
I'll be levitating through the floor. I won't be walking anymore.
What are your routines or three micro experiments that you can share with our listeners?
I think for me, being healthy is so fundamental to showing up well in the world. So it's looking after yourself in terms of what you eat, not eating stuff that is bad for you. And for me, the only thing that works is just you don't buy it. For me, because if I have the chocolates or the chips in the house, it will definitely be eaten, either by me or my family. So I just don't buy it. And it's amazing how quickly you don't actually feel the need to have it if it's not around, because it's an addiction, and it really has this way of just nagging at you. So just remove that distraction from your life as much as you can. Eat good, home-cooked, healthy stuff. The other one is about exercise. And I think now there's overwhelming research that between diet and exercise, you probably take care of your longevity. Another one is relationships with people. So these three basically ensure a long and happy life for people, right? So exercise. And I think, I have 2 young kids, so just finding time sometimes to exercise and do all of that can be difficult and overwhelming. But what I realize is that I'm just not as good a person when I don't do it. So, my argument to myself is that I will be a better mother, a better wife, a better colleague if I look after myself. So exercise and consistency is more important than sort of the level. You don't have to run a marathon, but just do stuff every day, 30, 40 minutes, whatever time that you have. And I think that the book Atomic Habits is great, about this, that don't keep comparing yourself to, Serena Williams or some great sportsman and think, I'm never going to get there, because that's just pointless, right? Just improve yourself today. How can you be a little better today than you were yesterday? And just use yourself as your measuring stick. Nobody else matters in that regard, and the last one, I would say that what I have discovered is that when you have an intent, don't hold it back. If you really want to do something or you believe something needs to happen, share it with people. Go and write that letter to the head of ISRO and say, I want to start a space club in my school. Because you will be surprised how often people get back to you. And you may think, I'm a nobody, I'm just a 10th standard kid in school in Gulbarga or something. But you will be amazed what happens when you put that intent out in the world and you take the time to articulate it, to write it down. So it's not just like daydreaming, right? You write it down and you send that letter to whoever matters. And I'm not saying you can send one letter and you are sorted. You maybe need to send 1,000 and you get one back. But I think once you take the discipline to put out an intent out in the world, you'll be amazed how much comes back at you.
The power of manifestation.
Yeah.
You touched upon relationship. I would want to kind of prod a little more on that. What do you do to ensure that you're nurturing those relationships day in, day out, be it family, be it colleagues, or be it the community at large?
I think that for me, the rule is that to say the truth. I think that's really important, because that's truly the only thing we can do for each other. We can call each other and ourselves on our lies, and we lie to ourselves, or we try to appear a certain way or the others, right? So the truth is the only thing that really matters, and the only thing that helps make things better. So if somebody is misbehaving, like with kids, if somebody is misbehaving, you tell them, and you make it clear that that doesn't work, and there are all these new agey. I was just reading an article about something called gentle parenting. Gentle parenting is when you don't tell your kids anything about anything they're doing wrong, and you just help them discover by themselves. But there's this teacher, and she wrote an article saying, if your kids don't know right from wrong, they will go to jail, and that's true. I believe that is true. So if my kids misbehave, I feel that my responsibility as their mother, first of all, is to make sure that society wants them around. People around them, not me, because I love them. I always want them around. But other people who don't love them as much as I do, want to play with them, want to do stuff with them, right? And you can only do that by stopping any behaviors that other people don't like or find disrespectful or wrongful, right? So that's important.
Great. So that brings us to the end of this Power of Three round. To bring in all of these changes, a critical element to do is to kind of think about it. An ability to pause or ability to kind of take a step back and see, okay, what the problem is, what is the role that one can play. What is the power of stepping back? How has it helped? And what can you kind of recommend the listeners to do in this whole element or in this whole magic of stepping back and making those decisions?
Yeah, I would say that sometimes when we see something happen and if something is unjust or wrong, unfair, right, we have this sense of indignation, right? It's like, what the hell are you doing? Why are you doing this? And it's a good thing. And sometimes that's what you need to do. Just call people out if they're doing something wrong. You know, it's like if you're in the bus and there's a young guy sitting and there's an old lady and the young guy wouldn't give a seat to the old lady, you feel indignation and you should at that moment tell this guy, hey, why don't you get up? You know, because I feel that that's a responsibility we have to each other. But at the same time, when it's a relationship, be it your colleagues or, you know, family or your kids, I think that sometimes acting on your emotions in a very immediate sense, like you feel angry or you feel upset, it doesn't help. So when you're writing this angry email to somebody, saving it in your outbox for a day and giving yourself that discipline to reread it 24 hours from now to see what you might want to change. I think that practice has never hurt anybody because it's never too late to say the rude thing. It's never too late to say the angry thing, you know, but things have a way of getting out of your hand. You know, once you said one bad thing, then the person responded, and then you have all that bad memory between you, and it's much harder to get over it, you know? So just giving yourself time not to act based on your emotions and not to act out in the world. And you might still feel angry and indignant, and so you should do something, but give yourself time to think about what's the outcome you really want. And will shouting right now at that person or sending that rude letter to your boss, will that get you what you want? I would say is a good practice.
Have there is any lessons learned for you in this journey of yours of crossing borders, picking up different roles, experiencing this diverse work nature? What would be that one lesson that has had a profound impact on you, the way you are today?
I think, say the truth, intent for the good. Be open to change your mind if you find evidence that what you believe is not working. And listen to people, because more often than not, they tell you exactly what they want or what they intend. So listen and observe.
I think there is a whole emphasis on the subtler, softer skills, and like you mentioned, the 21st century skills that goes in the making of being what it requires to be in this particular field. Is that a good summary to kind of call it out? So that while the intent is there, while you might have all the technical know-hows, but end of the day, what really matters to make a change is you got to be the change that you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. It applies for everyone. It's like clean up your own room before you go cleaning up the city. How Jordan Peterson says it, somebody I really admire and listen to. Before you fix everybody else, fix your own life.
Before you fix anybody else, fix yourself. On that note, something that we do on this podcast before we wrap up. So, Inspire Someone Today is a podcast that is focused on creating ripples of inspiration. So, before we sign off, what's your Inspire Someone Today message?
Do something today that makes you feel that you're better today than you were yesterday. And see what happens if you do that for a year.
Oh, better every day for the next 365 days, and you will see what that impact had on you and the community around you. On that note, Ira, thank you so much for sharing your journey, your experiences, and the fantastic work that you are doing in the social enterprise space. Many congratulations and wishing you good luck. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Inspire Someone Today. This is Srikanth, your host, signing off. Until next time, continue to carry the ripples of inspiration. Stay inspired, keep spreading the light.